I am Nine Lucas, and welcome to Book 101 Review. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest. He's the author of the book Racing for Dimensional Children in a Two-Dimensional World, no other than Mr. Tim McCarthy. Welcome to Book 101, Mr. Tim, and can you please introduce more about yourself?
All right. Well, I am and really have always been an educator. Uh, I was got my degree in English education, taught school in both public and private schools for about 10 years, moved up into administration. But then I moved on to my second love or other love, which is teaching the martial arts, and spent about a 30-year career there uh, in teaching the martial arts because I had, I guess, a broader impact on the students. In the school system, you're basically dealing with the mental dimension, helping them develop their minds, but pretty lacking in the physical, emotional, and especially moral dimensions, which I was able to do better in the martial arts. So that's where I spent the bulk of my career, developing programs for martial arts schools to help children be educated in all four dimensions. And again, the four dimensions: the physical, the mental, the emotional, and the spiritual.
Mr. Tim, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge to the world. So, how can a parent nurture the multidimensional thinking of children in a society that values conformity?
Well, conformity isn't always a bad thing. Uh, to me, that's where you start. You learn by imitating. So you imitate your parents, you imitate your friends, you imitate your teachers and coaches and religious leaders. That's where you start. That's how you learn. And then at some point, hopefully, you learn to go beyond that and become an individual. And so, in a world that comprises conformity, where we sit the children in neat little rows in the classroom and everybody works on the same thing at the same time, that's great. That's a great start. But at some point, you need to nurture that growth beyond. Now, for parents, the first step is to realize that there are four dimensions. And a lot of people just really don't understand that we have a physical dimension, which is we have bodies that need proper nutrition and proper exercise. And so if you sit your kid in the classroom for 8 hours a day and he doesn't move around, that's just not good for them. They've got to get out and move and have some exercise. You've got to feed them good food, healthy food, not just the sweets they want. So that's physically. Mentally, pretty well, the school system takes care of that and introducing things like logic and the scientific method. Emotionally, not so great, although schools have made great strides recently in implementing a socio-economic education. Maybe your school has that, maybe it doesn't, but at least what I've tried to do is give you the tools at home to do that before school, after school, on the weekends, on the holidays. And then spiritually, that's highly individualized, whatever your religion is, or if you really don't have a specific religion, you still must believe in right and wrong. And how do you educate your children along those lines? How help them to be empathetic so that they take into consideration the feelings of others and what's good for others, not just good for themselves. And so, what I've done is, first of all, help parents understand the four dimensions and then break it down age by age. What do you do with an infant? What do you do with a toddler? What do you do with a preschooler? All the way up through adolescence. what's happening in their development in each dimension. And then this is something I learned in the martial arts. Theory is great, but you have to put the theory into practice. I can show you how to defend yourself, but if you don't practice the motions, it won't come out when you need it. So you need to practice. And so in my book, I offer over 400 activities, age appropriate, to develop the child in each dimension. So how do you develop a toddler emotionally? How do you develop an adolescent spiritually? Not only do I describe it in each separate chapter, but offer the exercises, offer the activities to help develop it.
So, Mr. Tim, what does being four dimensional symbolize in the context of personal growth and understanding?
It symbolizes balance, actually. Uh, we are each four dimensional, but through our lives, we have chosen to emphasize one dimension. And so you'll have the classic jock, the athlete, who has emphasized his physical development, perhaps at the cost of his mental or emotional development. You've got the nerd, who's emphasized his mental or intellectual development, usually at the expense of his social or emotional development. And so, yes, we've all chosen what to emphasize in our lives, but being a four-dimensional person and raising a four-dimensional child, the goal is to be more balanced, where we're closer to 25, 25, 25, 25% instead of 95, 3, 1, something like that. So yes, you can be an academic, but why can't you take care of your health? Why can't you put as much effort into your spiritual development or your emotional development as you do into your academics or your physical development? Balance is the key.
Balance, people, balance. In everything we do, there will be balance. So, speaking of balance, how do we balance fostering uniqueness while preparing children to navigate world bit on a linear thinking?
I'm sorry, what? In one more time.
How do we balance fostering uniqueness while preparing children to navigate world built on linear thinking?
The world built on linear thinking. Well, it's that's really the mental dimension when you're talking about linear thinking and learning to think outside the box. And so, again, you learn by imitating, you learn by conforming. And then let's just take a Picasso as an example. Picasso was a fine artist. He could draw, paint realistically, beautifully before he became a mold breaking artist. And so, likewise with your children, up to a certain age, you're teaching them to conform, to think linearly, but then you start working to think outside the box. The simple questions like, what else could that mean? So your child comes home and says, Sally hates me. Why do you think Sally hates me? Well, she didn't sit next to me at lunch today. Okay, that's what happened. What else could that mean? If maybe she doesn't hate you, what could it mean instead? Well, maybe she wanted to sit with Mary, or maybe she had to go to the bathroom, or and you start thinking of possibility thinking, thinking outside the box, and thinking in a non-linear direction. And of course, one more pet peeve of mine, linear thinking or logical thinking based on the scientific method. The scientific method is great for the mental dimension. It doesn't really apply to the emotional dimension. There's not a whole lot of logic to emotions. And so each dimension has different rules. So if you try to apply the mental dimension to emotions, and all scientists try to do that, they're very mental, and they say, well, we're going to describe the emotion. You have the release of this hormone. Okay, yes, but that just shows you don't understand what love is. It's not just the release of a hormone. It is a feeling in the emotional dimension, not a process in the physical dimension, although that contributes to it. And so that's part of understanding things in a linear fashion, very logical, but that doesn't apply to emotions, and it certainly doesn't apply to spirituality. You can't prove religious truth. You can't prove faith. You can't prove God. But that's applying the mental rules to the spiritual dimension. The same problem is when you try to apply the rules of the spiritual dimension, your beliefs, to science and say, okay, well, I don't believe in medicine. I just believe God will heal me. May happen, but medicine works a little more consistently. And so you've got to find that balance of the right tool for the right job.
Right tool in the right job. That's awesome, Mr. Tim. Awesome and very well said. So, in what ways can a two-dimensional world limit their creativity and potential for dimensional children?
All right, so in the two-dimensional world, which is pretty much the world you and I are in right now, we're on a flat screen on Facebook, going up on YouTube or wherever this video will appear. It has no depth. And hopefully some of my explanations have a little mental depth, but there is no physical depth. And so we want to get the kids out of the two-dimensional world, get them off their phones, off the TV, off the laptop, tablet, into the real world where they have to move, where they have a physical existence. Ride a bike, swim, go for a sleigh ride, have a snowball fight in this time of year, whatever it takes to get off the screen. But also the interplay. When you're texting somebody, all you have are the words. You don't have the intonation. You don't have the pauses. You don't have the facial expressions, the cues that there's an emotion behind what's being said. And so when you live in a two-dimensional world, you're missing literally half the world. You've got to get the full depth of the emotion and even the spiritual context. When you feel spiritually that someone is good, or sometimes you can just feel that someone gives you the creeps. There's something not right about them. And that's a spiritual feeling that you need to pay attention to because it's a danger warning. And so, yes, get off the two-dimensional world. They're great distractions. The phone, the TV. If you're bored, you can watch them. It keeps you from being lonely, but it doesn't really address the emotional need, which is the loneliness, which means you need to contact human beings in the 3 or 4-dimensional world.
What role does empathy play in helping these children connect with the other who might not see the world the same way?
Empathy, very important emotion, but it also borders on the spiritual because you're not concerned just with yourself, which is a very low level of spiritual development. Little children deal in punishment and reward. And that's really all they're capable of. So you deal with them at that level. Then, in the preschool years, they start to understand that different people have different desires. They did experiments with children, and at a certain age, if they say, Daddy likes broccoli and you like cookies, What would you like to feed daddy? Oh, I like to feed daddy cookies because I like cookies. Daddy must like cookies. And a lot of adults tend to be this way. I think this way, so I think everybody thinks this way. And that's why we have Democrats who hate Republicans and don't understand them, and Republicans who hate Democrats because they don't understand how anybody could think differently. At a certain age, you start to realize, oh, if daddy likes broccoli, I'm going to give him broccoli. And that's a moral, but also it's a moral understanding, but it becomes an emotional, I guess, a feeling of empathy where you understand that that person has a separate feeling from your own. And so you try to judge the world by yourself, but really you have to understand that different people have different feelings and different thoughts. For example, my glasses. If I wear glasses, they're suitable to my eyes. If I give them to you, they're not going to work because they're not suitable to your eyes. You see the world differently than I see the world. All right. Same thing happens. My brain works a little different than yours. My emotions work a little differently than yours. And even my spiritual development is different than yours. And so empathy teaches you to listen, not just with your ears, but with your heart, with your spirit, to listen to the other person, to understand first before you try to teach or correct or really even interact. If you understand, you can interact better.
Yes, for sure. I agree with you, Mr. Tim. How can educators identify and support children who think beyond conventional frameworks?
It's a challenge. Having been an educator, I was the dean of students, so I was the disciplinarian. So it was my job to keep a bunch of high school students in line. And so, of course, a big challenge, but I also had to try to recognize when going outside the box was unhealthy or dangerous, and when going outside the box was creative and helpful. And so that's where sometimes it's a feeling and emotional, but many times it's a spiritual. And spirituality is the realm of right and wrong, where you have to figure if you're right or wrong. And an interesting comment I had one time where I was correcting a teenager in school saying, this is the rule, you have to follow it. And he was saying, but, and he was giving me some kind of argument. And I said, but I have to be consistent. And he says, but what if you're consistently wrong? And pow, that was a mind opening comment that, yes, the rules are the rules, but always be willing to question the rules. Are they good? Are they appropriate in this situation? And many times they're not. And that's, in my opinion, education is the process of taking an old belief or an old rule and replacing it with a new, better, improved belief or rule. And so if we can instill this in our children, that this is how they grow, you take what you believe, you take what you know, you put the new evidence in with it, perhaps it changes it, and perhaps it's an opportunity to grow.
Definitely. Very well said, Mr. Tim. So, what will be your advice for those parents out there? They want to raise their kid for dimensional children in a two-dimensional world.
Well, as I said before, first of all, realize that they have 4 dimensions. Educate yourself as best you can on what those dimensions are and how they develop. And of course, a great resource is my book, because I've cited over 200 research papers. So it's not just my opinion, but the research of developmental psychologists, excuse me, as to what's happening in your child's brain, in your child's development, as a toddler, as a preschooler, as a school age child, as a tween getting ready for teenage years, and as an adolescent. The brain changes, the emotions change. You need someone with experience, someone who's done the research, me, put it out there for you in my book in a very simple way. And then you also need not the theory, but also the practice, the activities to use with your child to help them move up to the next level, physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually.
So, Mr. Tim, what is your short-term and long-term goals in writing?
In writing, right now, short term is to get the word out on my book. I was fortunate enough to do a TED Talk, and so that's available if you go to TEDx on YouTube. If you can buy the book, but also I would love to instigate some research so that we get some of these mental academic people to do some research in the emotional and possibly even the moral or spiritual realm, and take some of my theories and prove them or even disprove them. I want to be the starting point for a conversation on four-dimensional existence, the four dimensions of human potential, and on raising four-dimensional children. So if you're a college student and you're looking for a thesis, this would be a great thesis to find out, to research, to see how it can help other parents raise their children better.
Mr. Tim, good luck for your goals and looking forward for more empowering books like this. So to sum up our discussion, what long-term impact could nurturing multidimensional thinking have on the child, future, and society at large?
Well, if you look around today, some of the problems we have, people are unhealthy. Like 2/3 of us are overweight or even obese. Okay? Heart disease, cancer. So physically, we need help. Mentally, I mean, look at politics of how we think of each other. Emotionally, how many people are stunted emotionally, have holes in their growth. How many teen suicide has gone up like 57% in the past 10 years. And spiritually, look at all the school shootings or regular shootings. So society really needs people who have better physical education and development, better mental education and development, much better emotional education and development, and better spiritual education and development. If we can raise four-dimensional children, we can help stem the tide on teen suicide, hopefully do something about our shooting problem in this country. Once we raise four-dimensional children, hopefully they will naturally raise four-dimensional children of their own. So I think it's a great start on changing the future of our society and our world.
Very well said, Mr. Tim McCarty. Thank you so much again for empowering us. I hope our generation to generations to come will more improve than we have today. So, Mr. Tim, can you please invite our listeners to support your book?
Of course, if you'd like to go to Amazon, you have to type in Raising Four-Dimensional Children. Otherwise, go to my website, which is 4D as in dimension, 4D-2D.com. Don't forget the dash because you'll end up in China somewhere. 4D-2D.com. And thank
Yes,
you.
yes, people, let's support Mr. Tim McCarty because if you support him, more empowering books like this to come. So, Mr. Tim, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Modicon people, see you soon. So, Mr. Tim, you are most welcome to come back if you have more books to promote.